In early February 1985, 46-year-old Val Plumwood would travel to the Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory of Australia. Val had made a career in feminism, philosophy and environmentalism, arguing against the separation of humans and the rest of nature. For her, Kakadu was the perfect place to continue her work. Its landmass was nearly half the size of Switzerland and was home to sacred Aboriginal sites teeming with wildlife. Travelling through the park, Val would eventually come to the East Alligator Lagoon, an area of the park she hadn't visited before. Hoping to find an Aboriginal rock art site across the lagoon and up one of its side channels, Val borrowed a canoe from one of the rangers. They would tell her it was safe to travel the back channels but to avoid the main river because of its fast current and the presence of crocodiles. With this in mind, Val took off across the lagoon, observing the bird life on her journey to find the art site. It was raining at the time, but that was expected. Kakadu was entering its wet season, and for most, the rain was a welcome relief from the scorching heat. But what Val didn't expect was how shallow the channels she was travelling through still were. Just the day before, she had observed water lilies and bird life flourishing in other parts of the lagoon, but as she continued on, the water remained shallow despite the continuous downpour. Val spent hours trying to locate the art site with no luck, and eventually decided to pull up near a rock bed that was overhanging the water for lunch. While quickly eating in the pouring rain, she began to feel as though something was watching her. Despite the failure to find the rock site, the shallow water and pouring rain, Val decided rather than head back to a caravan, she would instead travel to a different water channel closer to the river she was familiar with and had canoed through the previous day. The rain would continue to pour as she made her way to this channel, filling the canoe with water and forcing her to make stops along the side of the riverbed to tip her canoe over and empty it out. Soon she would encounter a sandbar cutting her off from the other side of the river, which meant she would need to get out and pull her canoe across to continue forward. Val was aware while relatively safe in a canoe, once she was out of it she would be exposing herself to danger. Pulling her canoe across the sandbar put her at the edge of two different bodies of water, and Crocodile's favourite method of capture was striking along these edges. Luckily, with the rain easing, Val was able to scan the water and pull her canoe across through the sand and shrub with more visibility. Val would pull her canoe up the sloping sand dune, but as she neared the top of it, her heart would drop. Somewhere along the way to this familiar and safer channel, she had taken a wrong turn because over the top of this dune, she saw the muddy brown waters of the East Alligator River. Remembering what the ranger had told her about the river current and the crocodiles living in it, Val knew she needed to turn back. The rain returned as she pulled her canoe back out into the stream she had come from. Relief would hit her when she got back into the canoe and began paddling away from the river. But the relief would only last a matter of 5 minutes. Not far from her canoe, floating toward her, was what at first looked like a stick. One she didn't remember passing on her way through. As she got closer, her heart started to beat faster. The stick had eyes, and they were focused on her. Though her heart quickened in pace at this sight, Val wasn't overly concerned. It was rare they would ever do anything to a boat or a canoe. The two were set to directly pass each other, so Val attempted to paddle out of the crocodile's way. But no matter how much she paddled, it seemed like the current was pulling the two directly toward each other. Val watched the crocodile as they passed, both calmly floating in opposite ways next to each other, the only sound being that of the rain in the river. Val was almost past the crocodile when this calm moment was shattered by a blow to her canoe. It shook the canoe, but it still remained upright. Val began paddling in terror, her confidence in the safety of her raft now shattered. Again the crocodile hit the canoe, continuing its assault and rocking her. Val continued to paddle, trying to get away from the pursuing croc, who only continued battering her canoe. Aware if it was to capsize, she would be as good as dead, she frantically searched for safety. The muddy banks on either side of the river were too steep and slippery to climb. But there was a paperbark tree looming over the stream, with branches hanging low enough that if she were to jump at the right time, she might be able to climb it. With no time to think and adrenaline pumping, Val paddled toward it, with the crocodile still beating against her canoe. Passing under the tree, Val stands up and looks down into the water to see the crocodile now alongside her. She waves her hands and screams at it to go away, desperately hoping she can scare it. Their gaze meets. Val looks directly into its flecked golden eyes, but all they offer is a look, one of a predator closing in on its prey. Val's body tenses as she steadies herself before jumping for the paperbark tree. Her foot doesn't even graze the tree before her peripheral catches the blurred image of a jaw full of great teeth exploding from the water. With its 3,700-pound bite force, the crocodile seizes Val between the legs. Hot pain shoots through her, and in a matter of seconds she's pulled down into the murky water below. Now clenching Val in its jaws, the crocodile performs a death roll by rolling over multiple times in an attempt to dismember, kill and drown its prey. Pure terror grips Val as she is spun around in the darkness of the water. Her limbs feel as though they are ripping and tearing away from her body, and the force drives water into her lungs. This feeling lasts for what seems like an eternity before her head comes out of the water and she struggles for breath. However, the crocodile hasn't released its grip from between her legs. It has not let her free. It's only resting. In this small window of time above water, Val can do nothing but rest with the crocodile before it suddenly rolls her again. Surfacing once again, Val, still in the crocodile's jaws, grabs hold of a nearby branch. Faced with the thought she would be slowly torn apart piece by piece, she vows to herself that she would rather be torn apart while holding onto the branch than subjected to another roll underwater. But something unexpected happens. The crocodile releases its jaws, freeing Val, who musters all of her strength to pull herself away from it and to the paperbark tree she had initially tried to jump to. Once again, she tries to climb the branch, and her nightmare repeats itself. Leaping out of the water, the crocodile latches onto her upper left thigh and rolls for a third time. Once again, Val's head pops out of the water, the thought of being slowly torn apart terrifying her. As they float there together, Val believes there's no way she will make it out alive. Instead of survival, she only seeks to quicken her death. Hoping to provoke it into killing her, she feels around the crocodile's head and finds 2 lumps. Thinking that these are its eyes, she jams her thumbs into the lumps, but they just slide in without resistance into warm holes. The crocodile remains unfazed, and Val realizes she must have put her thumbs into its nostrils. Reaching for the branch again, she's able to grab hold of it, and again the crocodile releases her from its jaws. Instead of trying for the tree again, she throws herself onto the slippery mud bank and attempts to find something to hold. Despite her best effort, she fails and slides back down to the crocodile waiting below. Again she tries and manages to grip a tuft of grass. Holding tight, she rests for a moment, exhausted from the attack. But her weight is pulling the grass out of the ground. In a panic, she shoves her fingers into the riverbank and penetrates the soft mud. Slowly, she pulls herself up the slope and away from the crocodile below. Though she survived the attack, she's severely injured and miles away from any person. Still, she's desperate to get away from the crocodile and begins to walk away from the area, but there's something wrong with her leg. Pushing on till she was far enough away to feel safe, Val checks her wounds. Her left thigh has been ripped open so deeply bits of fat, tendon and muscle are visible. Tearing off a piece of her clothing, she ties it around the injury and wills herself to continue walking. Knowing there was no way she could make it back to the ranger station and would need to rely on a search party to find her, Val staggers downstream through the bush. When her legs give out, she crawls to a spot and lays there, thinking if a search party were to find her, it would not be to the next day or the next night. Luckily, Val would be found in time, and though her injuries were severe, she would keep her limbs, and after recovery, she would walk once again.
On the 20th of October 2002, Isabel Von Jordan and her sister travelled to the Kakadu National Park as part of an adventure tour. Their original plan had been to spend their time in Bali, but they were injured in the 2002 Bali bombings and had decided to spend the rest of their trip in Australia. With their tour guide Glenn Robles and 9 others, the pair were taken across Kakadu and swam in various different locations over the next 2 days without issue. On the 22nd of October, they would arrive at the camping ground of Sandy Billabong. The group would eat dinner at 9 p.m, and at 10:30, their tour guide Glenn would suggest to the group that they swim off a sandbar located near a creek a short walk away. After leading the group to the sandbar, 7 of the members would go swimming, while 2 others watched from the bank. Not long after, Glenn would leave to meet up with another tour guide who was leading a different group. Whilst he was away, the group would notice that Isabel was missing and that they hadn't seen her leave. As they got to talking, each member would mention something strange that they had not taken notice of at the time. One member mentioned they heard Isabel scream, but thought it was just her messing around with one of the other group members. Another would say they felt something brush up against their legs while they were in the water, and yet another would say they thought they saw something large swimming away from the area. After putting everything together, they ran to find Glenn, and once he was made aware of the situation, he notified the rangers. 3 rangers would then go out into the water in a dinghy, and during their search, they would pass 8 other crocodiles. By 4 a.m, they would find a crocodile over 13 feet in length and 400 kg in size, with the body of Isabel in its jaws. With their suspicions confirmed, the group members, including Isabel's sister, would realise that she had been taken with them right there and they hadn't noticed. Glenn Robles, who had been a tour guide in the area for 13 years, would come under criminal investigation as a result of Isabel's death, due to his suggestion that the group swim in the water. In the court proceedings, he would explain that he believed the water was safe, as he had seen Aboriginals from the local community swimming in it and had found a pile of freshwater mussels which had been eaten. His conclusion was that they had been there during the day and that meant the water was safe. In the inquest to Isabel's death, the judge would voice their skepticism that he had seen any freshwater mussels, as it did not add up with his police statement following Isabel's death. While the group testified that Glenn had been a cautious and safe tour guide throughout their days previously with him, the judge regarded his actions as grossly negligent, stating anyone with the slightest knowledge of the area would know that it was not safe to swim in and believed Glenn was aware of the risks. Even if he wasn't aware of these risks, there was also signage warning of saltwater crocodiles in the area. It would be found when the tourist questioned him on this. He stated it was a warning about freshwater crocodiles, which were not dangerous. Glenn would admit that he had made a horrible error in judgment and for the death of Isabel. Ultimately, Glenn would plead guilty to making a dangerous omission and would be sentenced to a suspended 3-year jail sentence.
On March 29, 1987, 24-year-old Ginger Meadows, an American tourist who had been inspired to travel to Australia after watching the movie Crocodile Dundee, was working aboard a luxury yacht with her friend Jane Burchett when they sailed to the King Cascade Falls in Western Australia. Though a tourist destination, the boat captain understood that the falls were home to saltwater crocodiles, and before arriving had told Ginger not to do so much as dangle a foot off the boat. When they arrived at the falls, the captain and other members of the crew started climbing the waterfall. Ginger and Jane, however, decided to swim waist deep in the water below the falls, despite the warning they had been given. While climbing the falls, the captain would see a crocodile approaching the two women and scream out to them. However, he was too late, and the two women quickly found themselves backed into the wall of the waterfall. Still in waist-deep water, it approached the pair and bared its jaws. Jane, in a panic, threw her shoe at the crocodile, causing it to disappear under the water. With it no longer visible, Ginger, who was holding onto Jane's arm at the time, let go and dived into the water, attempting to swim to safety. When Ginger hit the water, she took 2 strokes before it latched around her waist and pulled her under the water. It then brought Ginger back up in front of Jane, and the two made eye contact before she was dragged back down. The day after the attack, which happened to be her 25th birthday, Ginger's body would be found near a cluster of mangroves in the Prince Regent River. Her remains would be put inside a body bag and placed at the front of the rescue boat. After travelling 9 miles up to the mouth of the river, another crocodile would leap 4 feet out of the water and attempt to take the bag back into the river. The death of Ginger Meadows would make American headlines and be one of the most notorious cases for many years in Australia.